Hello, humans. Hello, humans. September 12, 2:10 p.m. Gorgeous afternoon here. It was sort of a overcast morning, cleared up around 11. We're into 66 degrees, a lot of sun, although I'm hearing chemtrail jets overhead. Anyway, I wanted to ramble on for a few minutes here because of a confluence and convergence of a bunch of thoughts and queries. So I just finished watching Carrie Cassidy's appearance on Jean-Claude's BeyondMystic.net channel on Rumble. It was very, very interesting. I have particular predictable bitches about Carrie Cassidy's sources and her reliance on them. But, I have no animosity towards Carrie. Now, some of the things that have been occurring to me, though, sort of intrude or they reflect some of the issues that Carrie Cassidy has. So I'm just going to use her as an example for humanity in general, right? Because we have to apply a metric, we have to apply that same metric to humanity that we might apply to her. Okay, so here I am questioning her reliance on Mark Richards and Charlie Ward and Fildo Godlewski. Okay, because I find them all to be not credible at all, right? For various different reasons. And I then have to ask myself, why doesn't she see in those individuals what I see in those individuals? Why is she not questioning them along in the same lines that I am? Basically, because I'm assuming that my thought process is both correct and logical. And not necessarily the correct part, but the logic part should mean that she would also follow some of that same level of thinking, right? But that's neither here nor there. But it also dawned on me to take a step back. And this is from this personal view, to actually widen my personal view, simply because of running into some issues here with our physical reality trying to tell me something. So part of the point of Japanese yoga, Shinshin Soitsu Do, and I did a variant for 40 years, Shinshin Soitsu Aikido, but part of the point there is to learn to listen to universe. And so when universe slaps me upside the head with a bunch of linguistic clues, I usually will pay attention, or when I pay attention, because I can't really say usually because I'm not able to determine those times when I didn't. But when I do pay attention and investigate, it's always very worthwhile. This is one of those periods of time. So I've enlarged my view, and I'm applying the same metric to humanity and to myself that I'm applying to Carrie in terms of my criticism of her sources. And basically I can say that my criticism of her sources comes down to, what is she missing? And that is a sort of a translation of, why doesn't she see what I see, right? And so it's like, what is she missing that she's not catching on to the fact that to my view, and I believe it to be factual, that, Mark Richards was not a captain. And that's as far as it goes, and everything else is horseshit that he's doing just for his own amusement in the confinements of life in prison. And he's playing her because he can play her and he doesn't have many other playmates. So I'm saying, what is she missing there? Now I'm turning it back on myself, and I've enlarged my view, and then I've been thinking about what I've been missing. And it's dawned on me as a result of things that universe has brought to my attention in the form of Stephen Greer, his Disclosure Project database, and a bunch of other things, that it's possible that we're all missing things on a very large level. All right, so I dispute Stephen Greer's statement that all aliens are beneficial. Okay. And, I would state that we have no receipts of that, for that viewpoint. We have no proof of that whatsoever. And that his statement that we don't have any evidence of evil aliens is not factual at all. And that in so stating, he's denying the actual literal history and the literal translation of all different kinds of ancient literature. Hang on a second. We've got fighter jets. Okay, sorry about that. It's 2:17 on September 12th, 2:17 p.m. here on the coast. There were a couple of fighter jets doing dogfight maneuvers overhead. I went in and watched them for a few seconds, maybe 15 seconds, came in to get the camera, and they've moved out of visual range. So they're back towards the Olympic Mountains, not towards the ocean, where I'd have perfectly good view of them. Anyway, they were extremely low and not running on afterburners, but they were doing some weird maneuvers that caused some strange noise here. Anyway, so getting back to what I was saying, what am I missing, right? What are we all missing? And so it's come to and then Stephen Greer. So Stephen Greer is missing the idea that just because, I think that he's basing his aliens are beneficial, idea on the presumed fact that they have yet to attack us. Okay. And even though we're doing evil things to them. And I don't know and that's certainly not factual. That's not a good way to think. Okay. So do we know we're not being attacked? Would we recognize it if we were being attacked by space aliens? I have to say that there's a big chunk of certainty that we would not, that there's a big potential that we would not know we were being attacked. In other words, he's talking about scalar weapons and all this kind of stuff, right? But how do we know that we're not under attack by weapons that we don't recognize as weapons? All right. So, there was this one, instance in one of these ancient literature things that my old farts group had gotten into. And I think it was Avestan. I don't think it was Sanskrit, but it was so long ago I can't say for sure at the moment. And the group's disbanded because of the situation with Russia, and they all got kicked out. In any event, so the ancient literature had an instance that we debated for, I don't know, a couple of weeks as to what we were actually reading in terms of the translation here. And it seems very probable that we were reading a translation in which these people were recording having been attacked by a weapon that produced sneezing. Constant, continuous sneezing that if you were in the area of it, and that's how they referred to it. So it may have been a beam weapon. It may have been, a stationary field weapon. Who knows? But the people that recorded the description said that if you were in this, proximity of it too long, you would, your brain basically would cease operations because of the continual sneezing, and you would dehydrate, and that people were sneezing even though they were unconscious. Made unconscious by this weapon. So, or by this state. Now, even in this literature, the people that were experiencing it did not recognize that it was a weapon. That's what was the debate with us. Were they reporting, through our transliteration and translation, et cetera, and see, it's very rare to get body, functions like that dwelt on in ancient literature. They're mainly all hymns and shit and tainted by religious thinking. But even so, it's quite rare. And here they went on for some number of what we would think of as pages, describing the issue with the sneezing. And were they being attacked by a weapon? And our issue at the time we were discussing it was, were they describing it as being attacked by a weapon, which is, of course, where my mind leapt to, or were they describing it as being like a natural phenomenon? it was ambiguous given the transliteration, or excuse me, it was possible to easily possible to have contra translations that were opposite of each other that disagreed on that point. And so there was sort of support for both sides of that. In any way, so this got me thinking about the idea of the alien intervention. If we take our minds up high enough, if we get a big enough view where we have and consider it all from history and don't get lost in the minutia, we have to ask ourselves, what are we missing? And then from there, what do we think is going on? And then from there, we have to ask ourselves, why do we think that? And if we have receipts that make us think that, then why do we think those receipts are valid? And what supporting receipts do we have suggests that those were indeed valid, right? And then down that next layer, are these valid? Because we're dealing with a potentially highly sophisticated mentition on the part of let's just say, on the part of the intervenors, okay? Because we're suffering an intervention. It's been ongoing for thousands of years. And as I was saying about Stephen Greer, he denies history. Even the Bible is replete with nothing but horror stories. The Torah also, the horror stories of the Elohim feasting on the stupid human herd, so that they could be consumed, all of this kind of stuff, right? Throwing them in the fire for Baal, all of these kind of things. This is not organic mental aberration arising in humans of a natural kind of any stated reason. It is accurate reporting as much as we can get from distorted books, but it's accurate reporting of visitation by space aliens and abuse of humanity by those same space aliens. Doggo, hang on. Sorry about that. I think the planes set her off. Anyway, so getting back to the idea of what are we missing and would we know we were being attacked and all of this kind of stuff, right? If we're dealing in fact with space aliens, it doesn't matter if if their civilization is 1 million years older than ours or not. They're not going to have any more advanced consciousness. You can't assume they're beneficial. And if they're not beneficial, we cannot assume that just because we don't recognize the weapon that we're not being attacked. And so let me give you a particular instance, right? You see chemtrails every day. You look up in the sky, you see the chemtrails. How do you know they're not being put up there by space aliens? How do you know that that is not the attack? Just because you think you're seeing an airplane deliver those chemtrails, are you really? How about if that's the psyop? How about if the space aliens are simply projecting an airplane up there in order that you not think that they're spraying you, that you would really freak out if you thought that the space aliens were spraying the whole herd of humans and there was not shit we could do about it, right? So they make you think it's between you and your government's doing it for a stupid reason like supposed or human-caused climate change, right? And so that is a very sophisticated form of a psyop that would work perfectly, and in fact may be working perfectly, because who the hell knows of any chemtrail spraying base? So Jeff Berwick, the anarcho-capitalist guy out of Mexico, made a statement once about if there were too many chemtrails or something like this in the area. I'm loosely mangling and paraphrasing his words, but basically he was saying if there were a chemtrail base around here and it was giving him shit and he knew that he was living under this crap all the time, that he would get together with some of his other anarchy kind of fellows, locals, and they would put together a mercenary team and go take out that base. And it's like, well, Jeff, I'm all for it. I'd love to see it done, but where the fuck are these bases? given the amount of spring, this is something I get into, is always doing energy calculations and resource analysis, right? Because I did that for government for years. I automated all of that stuff at a technical level, wrote all these algorithms for calculating how many board feet of lumber grow per year in this kind of terrain, et cetera, how many fishes come back, what influences the different kinds of fishes, how commercially viable they are, all of that sort of shit. In order to write the code, I had to learn the nature of these kinds of analyses of these resources. So my mind goes back that way. And so I'm saying right now that we do not have enough military airports, and I'm assuming a military airport because they could use some level of restriction on the airspace around them to prevent people from noticing. But we don't have enough military airports nor commercial jet fleet to support the chemtrail spraying that's going on at this moment. So you know all the problems with Boeing. Why aren't we having these problems with the chemtrail planes, right? You know, or the DEI or any of this kind of stuff? Why don't we see the same sorts of effects? Why are there not chemtrail planes crashing all to hell and gone? I'm just asking questions and letting you think about some of these ideas, because we need to ask ourselves, we need to say, this is an intervention. It's obvious. We've seen the evidence of it going way back in history and even in modern history. And this intervention is happening for an unknown reason. That people like Stephen Greer and others would put a let's help humanity, savior, external savior face on it does not make it so. It's an intervention of an unknown nature for an unknown purpose that we have no participation in other than being the target of the intervention. The complexity of the intervention can't even be adequately framed because of the pollution of armamentation about the nature of the intervention going back for decades. And we could frame it. We can get into the Elohim worship cult and all their reasons for doing so, the dark military projects, special access projects, all of this kind of shit, and their reasons for obscuring it all. But the fact is that it is an intervention, and we are its target, and its purpose is unknown. I have to make the assumption, because of the ancient history of humanity being abused by the Elohim, the Anunnaki, the Devas, all of the pantheon of gods in Greece, Rome, Germany, everywhere except very few spots in the northern hemisphere, and including all of the pantheon of gods in the southern hemisphere, all of who were abusers of humanity. None of them helped us. And they're farming us. That's my position, that I have to start with that basis. Because that's something I didn't miss, was that in ancient history, humans were farmed. And they discussed the farming aspect of humans in very serious ways. And they may have used things on us, like I say, this sneezing field or whatever the hell it was, just the way we would use electric cattle prods, right? It doesn't kill the cow or anything. And would the cow even consider it to be a weapon, or just some form of a natural obstacle that exists around humans so that it can't go bash the human that's given it shit, and that it has to respond to it? So the cow doesn't see itself being attacked by the human with the electric cattle prod. It is just responding to the irritating impulse of the electricity coming through its skin. And it's not putting a why to the other side of it. It just goes the way that thing is not, right? So it's just responding in a natural fashion, going where that cattle prod is not. Are we also being handled this way? I presume so. And we have to ask ourselves, what are we missing about that, right? Especially relative to weapons, and especially relative to people like Stephen Greer. Now, I like Stephen Greer, okay? I'm not dissing him at all. I'm just saying I don't think his vision is wide enough, and I find this concerning as a paranoid and as a martial artist. But I find this concerning that he's advising government about such things and will undoubtedly give government persons the impression that it is a fact that all aliens are benign. And I think that we need to let them know that that's his opinion, and he may think he has receipts and proof of that, but that the algorithm does not support that. He's denying history, and the algorithm would basically be saying, don't miss on widening your view to take in all of the circumstances that are going on. So now I think we're actually being attacked by aliens, and I think it's escalating, and it's been going out of at us for a serious number of years. I do find it credible, a lot of the things that Greer is saying about, nothing you can state that they would want us for, like DNA. No, they don't need to do that, right? It's a waste to fuck with the animal that way in order to get DNA. We don't do that. We get a swab and hit the cow. So, a lot of the stuff I agree with him. Military personnel, although I don't know that it's all for PSYOP, okay? I think there are other things going on. Like in terms of this intervention, the intervening aliens could very easily collect their DNA samples by way of our military in order not to be seen addressing management of the herd. As long as it's just one human on another human, then we're not looking outside of humanity for the controllers that are managing our herd, right? Us guys. And so just a couple of asides. Happened to see Greer in an interview. He was talking about scalar weapons, and this brought up the my criticism of these EE Systems guys and their supposed putting out of scalar waves. If indeed they were putting out scalar waves, they would be arrested as soon as they took these machines active within like 50 or 60 miles of any airport. And if it were indeed scalar at all, the DOD would come and shut them down. So they're bogus. You can tell right there that they are indeed bogus, just by our reality. Okay, so there was this, all right, so as we see in the woo world out and about, all these people concerned with UFOs and such, occurrences, phenomena, there's also a corresponding movement or group, or not group, but a corresponding wave that is going through liberal and progressives. They think, of course, that the whole world is doomed to climate change and, all of this horse shit that the WEF has been shoveling out, overpopulation and all these kind of things. And their vision is obscured by a lot of that. They think the WEF's numbers for climate change and all of the overpopulation and stuff are factual. They don't know that they're being played relative to that. But what's interesting, though, is that they are coming to the same conclusions relative to the intervention. That there's something going on. We don't know what the fuck it is, and we better start paying attention. And it is not beneficial simply because we know that. We have a fact. We have proof of that in that these beings that are intervening are not honest and forthright with their contact to humanity. They're duplicitous, they're surreptitious, they're doing it in the shadows and all of this. This means by nature that they are not our friends. So am I going to go and I can't think of an analogy within humans, but you don't go and help someone by hiding the fact that by hiding all of your input to the whole situation, right? If you're going to go and do something, you're forthright, because otherwise it really does intrude on personal choice, karma, and all of this kind of stuff. So we know that these beings that are here with this intervention are not beneficial. At some level, they're running their own game on us. That they have not yet attacked us simply means they have not yet attacked us with things that we recognize as weapons. And nothing more. And we can't take Stephen Greer's emotionally backed position as being an analytical one. Just as we can't take many or most of Carrie Cassidy's emotionally backed positions on the things that her whistleblowers say as being any kind of an analysis or fact-based. It's just not so in either case. In both cases, these individuals are allowing their conclusions to take root in their mind without question, and thereafter they build upon those conclusions as though they were a solid foundation, which they are not. So the intervention, being here for its own purposes, places us in kind of a quandary. A serious quandary, and then many thousands of millions of questions that about that quandary, right? We have to ponder all of this, and then we also have to come up with our own reasoned response, not an emotional one that says, oh, all aliens are good, or because they're not an octopus sucking out my eyes, they're benign. But we also have to, in my opinion, we have to examine ourselves at a very significantly deep level. And that is how we, so in the intervention, one thing that I want to ask is, what are the aliens getting out of it? Okay, so I'm not assuming altruism on anybody's part. I'm assuming that they're entirely self-interested. And if they are altruistic, then I would like to know, again, what are they getting out of it? Because with humans, it's a particular emotional complex that produces that level of response, or that level of action, behavior that we call altruism. With the space aliens, us thinking they're benign and they're going to help us and all of this kind of stuff. What are they getting out of it? Where do they benefit? You can say some things about it in a negative fashion, like they benefit, which cause problems in the materium. And I would buy that to some extent, but I don't know that that is enough of a motivation for them to create an intervention and then hide all of their intent, presence, etc. And again, I'm still not convinced that we're not being attacked by them continuously with weapons that we do not recognize as weapons because we have not expanded our vision. So, one of the things I wanted to discuss was to point out that there's parts of humanity, of being human, that we never, ever think about. We think about the adrenochrome, we think about the adrenaline oxidization, we think about the, exploitation for, but we don't consider ourselves in relation to this larger picture of humanity in a farm. We always think of ourselves as discrete individuals that are cooperating in these various levels of abstract social interaction, or not abstract, but social interaction, or frequently around abstract concepts, like political parties, right? They don't exist except in your mind. Okay, but here's something that it all goes back to, is the human mind in that regard. And humans are not, as most people are going to consider them, all right? Most of you can go and look me back, or prove me wrong on this, right? But most of the information we collect from our senses goes directly into a part of our mind and goes through into our subconscious. And then our thought processes go through more complex. So in other words, what you see and, memory and of what you've seen and so on, and your associations with the emotions at the time you see it constitute the memory of that particular event or instance or whatever, right? And it is usually the emotions or other people, and sometimes locations, but usually emotions or other people that were involved in the incident that allow you to retrieve it, and they're used as sort of an index in that retrieval process. Now, those thoughts and that you think about that instance and what you were thinking at that time go through a different process to become stored in memory. And that process is part of the differentiation within the mind that has those thoughts, for instance, going through the hippocampus, and where they are thought of as declarative. This is why hypnosis works. This is why auto-hypnosis works, because you basically declare to your brain, you are hypnotized, and it becomes hypnotized. Because it goes through the hippocampus, is not discriminated in any way. There's no discernment put against it to see if it's true or false or whatever, and it's just stored in that form as a declarative statement that went through the hippocampus. The process that does that is separate from and uses different pathways and stuff from the process by which we store our metadata. Okay, and that's what I'm calling it. It's just like computer metadata. So when I would go and do web scraping, I always had to have, the time it was scraped, how it got there in terms of the IP address chain, the date, the time, the amount of volume, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All this detailed stuff about each and every one of these so that I would have it in an appropriate context for later on analysis. We have to do that ourselves on all of this data. Even though it's all being done in a subconscious level, we don't ever think about it. We're storing all these kinds of indices on this data in order to be able to retrieve it as memory. Those metadata things are our storage mechanism. It's estimated that some 90+% of all of the things you perceive that are stored are not your thoughts about that stuff, but it is in fact the metadata and the images and so on, right? It's still unknown how these are stored, where they're stored. There's all these theories and so forth. It appears to me that the most logical theory is that they're not stored in the human body, that simply is a pointer system to memories that are stored out in the ether, which is also what the word Akasha means, is the ether. And so the Akashic records are the etheric records. And, anyway, so if we examine ourselves in that fashion, thinking of ourselves as basically walking around sensor arrays where 90+% of the information we get that we store is simply our location and what's going on with us and so on as we walk around and see this shit, then one must wonder, what is the other 10%? The thinking is, what is that about relative to both the storage of it, how that occurs and so on, but also of these two levels of our mentition are either involved in or attractive to or participating in the intervention. So I bring this up because of the frequent claims, and I don't buy it, because I do believe that Stephen Greer is correct, and a lot of these, psyop theater by the CIA et al. But it is for certain in my mind that we're dealing with space aliens that are aware of psychic aspects of humanity. We know this from ancient literature and the discussions about the mind-to-machine interface. If we're correct with that, we could be absolutely bullshit mad with that, totally screwed, totally wrong, totally off on all of these mistransliterations and misinterpretations of the stuff, but I don't believe so. If we were correct, then these space aliens know about our psychic capabilities, and they exploit them through what's known as the circulating melanin system within our bodies. And they tap into and have their mind-to-machine interface through aspects of our brain that deeply involve smell. And that one of the reason we came across this sneezing thing was that it was presented by one guy, and we noted that they had prohibitions or cautions relative to air, dust, all this kind of stuff, and the humans on the other side of the man-to-machine interface, and that the language was such that it seemed to be suggesting that you wanted to keep these environments dust-free so that your human didn't sneeze, because sneezing so disrupts the mind, and particularly that one of those points at which the mind-to-machine interface connected, which was the activity in the part of the brain that's affected by and controls smell, which is the hippocampus. Oh, no, hypothalamus. Sorry, the hypothalamus. And so, which is a weird kind of an organ. It's a weird kind of a little gland. These sloshy pools of hormones that are really ephemeral, and it's really cool. And there's a lot of discussion of that particular part of the brain, and it's in the middle of it's in the image of the Eye of Horus that we see going back to ancient Egypt, but there's also analogs for that in Mesoamerica. And, we presume that ancient Egypt and Mesoamerica communicated, they had contact and so on. So I'm not presuming in anything other than that, because we do have all of those Egyptian artifacts and stela that were found in North America. Anyway, so it's like, what are we missing here? We have to think and put our minds out at a broader level and deal with our contention in a much more all-encompassing, holistic kind of an understanding, right? So it would help us greatly to be able to derive, right, what's their motivation. That's much more important than what shape they are. And a lot of that, what shape are they? Are they a tall white, a gray, any of this kind of shit? That's going to blind us by putting in preconceptions into our brain based on the shapes and stuff, because that's how our brains are designed to work. It's actually better for us to just think about them as an amorphous mass, and then say, what are the intervening agents here getting out of this? What's their motivation? And then we can also start drilling in on how are they operating their intervention, and then rather than get, in my opinion, it'd be better not to get hung up on the details of what do they get out of this particular visitation, this particular episode with a UFO or whatever, but rather approach it at a much broader level and not get bound up in the details, because it is there, getting bound up in the details, that we start making all of these wrong conclusions, that we lose our level of discrimination and discernment as to the situation in which we are finding ourselves. Because once you start looking at the details of the situation, you're no longer looking at them with yourself in that picture. You're only seeing the detailed part of the picture without taking into account your own presence there and how that affects everything. So, this is one of my bitches that, Carrie Cassidy gets involved in the details that these supposed whistleblowers bring to her, and has no understanding of the metadata story around those or around the information brought to her, nor the metadata around the personalities and identity of the people that are bringing her those stories and their possible motivation for lying. Now, I actually think she's had some good witnesses, right? George Greer and some of these guys from NATO, that you can validate their actual experience there and so on. And I've talked to Art Neumann, right? They called him Henry Deacon, and he's a squirrel, but he's in that regard, in the paradigm and in the role that he was presented in that paradigm of disclosure, he is as he says he is. So, so he was, in my mind, he was legit in that sense. Doesn't mean any of the stuff that he told Carrie was legit, because he could have been a plant just there to disrupt things, right? In any event, so as a paranoid, I always look at a lot of this stuff. Now I've got a bigger picture of it, and I'm starting to think, well, I can see some, now that I'm elevating my vision outward to include all of us in that vision while this is all happening. It's like, wow, there's some interesting things being revealed here. And of course, it gives you a much broader historical perspective. Oh shit, 39 minutes. Okay, so that's enough for this. Hang on a second, let me look at my notes. So a couple of things. The aliens are undoubtedly using this alternative physics, the other physics they call it. And I would like to know their paradigm in which that physics is placed, how their view of universe and the mechanisms by which it operates, not only at the physics level, but also how how they think of themselves within universe, right? What is their position in universe? Do they have, so there's all different kinds of things relative to their biology that can intrude on their thinking. And so their shape at that level matters in the sense that, like if they have a reproductive process that does not involve anything that we would understand as sex, that's going to provide them with a different perspective on reality than we have. So the insectoids that would be dealing with us being egg layers and all of that kind of stuff would be those kind of beings. They would have nothing in which they could identify. They would find nothing in humans relative to our sexual drives, etc., with which they could identify. And we would need, if we understood that we were fighting insectoids, we would need to understand that, even if they were intelligent, that they had a viewpoint that we could not reach across and grasp, because none of humanity lived that way. We don't have an analog. And so this kind of thing, I think, is important here. And then, how do I would love to know how, or rather, if we can make some deductions as to how the aliens think about time, right? The physical aspects and manifestation of time and energy within our universe, and what is their understanding of it. Because that'll also give us really a lot of clues as to what their motivation is for the intervention. I do not buy that they are beneficent, benign, or beneficial for humans. Okay? In fact, I think I see evidence that the deep state believes that the intervention is about seizing control of the herd. And so one way to characterize it, so I believe that that's the case. I believe that the deep state believes that. And there's evidence that I would think would support their view that the intervention is to seize control of all of humanity and planet Earth, to maintain a large amount of humans here in a workforce to provide resources for the interveners. That would be a very simplistic way of looking at what may be occurring. But I think that is a view that many in the deep state have. I think that view is tainted by many people within the deep state having particular religious views in which they frame this as the good or evil, whether they're supporting the interveners or against them, whether they believe the interveners are Luciferian or not, does not matter. But I think there's many people that do see this through a religious viewpoint, which is, as Stephen Greer notes, he didn't say it this way, really fucking up our response and our understanding of it and our analysis of it even. So, I do think that there are people within the deep state at a high enough level that their actions cause ripples that could be discerned if you were looking closely in terms of, policy changes, that kind of thing. And so I think that these people in the deep state at a high enough level are concerned about the intervention. And the goal, and that they think that the goal of the intervention is the complete takeover of humanity for some purpose, which they believe somehow to be as a workforce or, miners, mine gold, who the fuck knows, right? But as a resource for the interveners. Now, so in my understanding, I don't see any evidence that those people that in the deep state that think this, that believe this, I don't see any evidence that these guys are seeing the picture with humanity in it. Okay? So I think that they too are responding to the details of the intervention itself and instantly are going into this mindset of us against them without seeing ourselves, without seeing humanity in the midst of this picture. The reason that I think that these people do that is that these people are the inheritors of the management class for the herd, and that these people inherently think of themselves as not being part of the herd of humanity, as being apart from it. And so therefore they're not, so they therefore see the herd in relation to the space aliens and the intervention, and the potential for that intervention to be about taking over the herd and managing it at a different level. But they don't see themselves in that picture, right? They don't see their own participation in everything that's going on. This is my conclusion based on my my observations. So in conclusion, I'll wrap it up here. It's my opinion that we're not looking at this in the right way, that there's no discussion or any of that kind of stuff about the intervention at a level that is species level, and at a wide enough view to place ourselves within the context. Where are we? What are we doing? Are we doing things correctly relative to this context of the intervention? And we're going to be in this intervention for who knows how many thousands of years. We've already been in it for thousands of years. We're in a uptick in activity in it, and it would behoove us to just have a more adult view of what's going on. And the only way you can get there is through this hardcore analysis with yourself in the picture, and your own, and looking at your own thoughts, actions, positions, biases, and so on, and how they predispose you to basically be played during the process of this intervention. And yes, I do think we're being attacked. I do think it's ongoing. I think it's active, and I'm certain that they're attacking us at the mental level. And we're unaware of it. We don't see it as a weapon. Anyway, more about this as we go forward here in the future. I've got to go do chores. So, yeah, Okay, talk to you guys later.